But I wanted to go to Dahr Jamail. Dahr has a lot of courage. We've interviewed him many times over the years. He was in Lebanon during the last war there. He's been in Iraq multiple times. He's an American living right here in Texas, out in Marfa, out there with the Marfa Lights. It's originally from Houston. And his reporting's always turned out to be very, very accurate. He's broken a lot of major news. One of the stories he just put out a few weeks ago, the reason I wanted to get him back on was the U.S. occupation of Iraq continues unabated. And I went and researched his story and others. They're redrawing the major city maps to not count U.S. military bases as part of the city, to now say they're out of the city, or they're withdrawing from the surge that put them out in little substations back into their main bases. So it's a 3-year-old policy. So it's literal shell game. And they've also, of course, rotated 30-plus thousand troops into Afghanistan and Pakistan, and those numbers are growing. So here's the Democrats getting into office in 2006 in the House, electing Barack Obama in late 2008. And I talked to Democrats on the street, and they go, yeah, we're not in Iraq anymore, because they had that big psyop, kind of like Bush with the aircraft carrier, mission accomplished. I mean, this is sick. If Bush would have tried this, would we have put up with it? And they also make it a left-right issue. Ron Paul isn't for the war. Most Republicans aren't. At CPAC, the big Republican deal, he got a standing ovation against the war. Nobody's for this war but a few morons. I know the troops want to come home, 80+% in polls. Eyewitness, Dahr Jamail joins us. His new book is out, available at better bookstores everywhere. The Will to Resist, Soldiers Who Refuse to Fight in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like Pat Tillman, boy, they killed him deader than a hammer. Dahr Jamail, great to have you here.
Good to be with you, Alex. Thank you.
So much has happened since I had you on probably 2 years ago. You've been out of the country most of the time, hard man to get a hold of. We'll have you back up soon, but today in limited time, tell us the saga, what you've seen on this quest the last few years.
Well, regarding the continuation of the occupation of Iraq, it's really amazing to me to just watch how, folks like you and me, Alex, who get the U.S. Empire Project and get that these occupations of both Iraq and Afghanistan were permanent ventures going into them. I mean, before they even happened, it was very, very clear what was going to be happening there.
It was stated, yeah.
And it was, and then we have even literally just today, or just yesterday, when Puppet Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki from Baghdad shows up in D.C. and is hanging out with President Barack Obama, and he says, quote, "If the Iraqi forces require further training and further support, we shall examine this then." It's talking about 2011 at that time, based on the needs of Iraq. So he's already, of course, just laying the propaganda path out there for the U.S. Occupation to continue unabated, and then coupled with what you're just saying, redrawing the maps of cities, so now technically the bases aren't inside the cities. But, my contacts in Iraq are saying patrols are still happening in Baghdad, patrols are still happening in other cities. Some of the bigger bases, like the one in Baghdad, are still right there. We're still looking at over 130,000 U.S. troops there, and more flowing into Afghanistan. So we're really, again, we're just seeing a continuation of Bush policy in both Iraq and Afghanistan.
But isn't this classic corporate doublespeak or soft power where Obama always, instead of Bush is saying, I don't care, I'm going to do what I want, Obama will say, you have won, I won't hire lobbyists, or you have won, I'll pull out of Iraq, or you have won, I won't give banker bailout bonus money, and then he does the exact opposite. I mean, he's a lot slicker because he doesn't give you a fight. He tells you, okay, I agree with you, but then goes around behind your back. I mean, it is really hard to stomach this.
Well, I think you're exactly right, and I think that's actually the core of how and why he's been as effective as he is, getting most of the mainstream Democrats to really drink the Obama Kool-Aid where, hey, you voted for him and he says he's going to change everything, and just because he's more charismatic and articulate and can actually complete sentences unlike Bush, people believe him. He's a hell of a salesman, and he's done a really good job, but, the facts are stacking up against him. Everyone, when people are getting kicked out of their homes and the government keeps ramping up domestic threats against people and all of this, we're in both occupations continuing unabated, the facts are starting to pile up against him. So I think inevitably at some point, despite him being a very wonderful branding marketing tool as he's been, I think eventually the facts are going to kind of obscure that enough to where enough people can see it. At least that's my hope.
Well, I hope you're right. I mean, evidence shows his approval rating's dropping, but I've seen the polls. It's not really over the war. They've kind of put that out of sight, out of mind as they put troops in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, major escalations, really scary stuff, menacing the Russians, moving more troops into those areas, kind of continuing Bush's sneak attack on South Ossetia. It's clear the corporate managers of both parties, as the RAND Corporation document said 6 months ago, need a global war to go ahead and establish this new global banking dictatorship. So people are waking up to Obama, but only because he didn't fix the economy overnight as he had promised. When you talk to Democrats or you talk to progressives, are they starting, just from what you see on the ground, to see through him? Or are they saying, like some Democrats I talk to or anti-war folks go, well, at least he's not Bush. At least he makes me feel good while he betrays me.
Well, it's unfortunately, Alex, it's been more of the latter where, granted, there are more and more people waking up, and certainly more and more of us on the fringe that have known this all along are seeing more people kind of enter into our community and are really seeing the reality. But unfortunately, I think most people are still saying that, yeah, okay, things are bad, and yeah, Obama's disappointing and he's not fulfilling all his promises, but he took over a really desperate situation, so we have to give him more time, et cetera, et cetera. So really, indications are that I think, unfortunately, the bulk of people are still kind of sleepwalking through this and really just not willing to look at the fact that, Barack Obama, for example, just talking about Iraq and Afghanistan, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to see that he kept Bush's Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates. He kept all the highest-ranking people in the Pentagon there from Bush to just continue over. I mean, there's been a seamless continuation in policy. And we're not even talking about domestically, but just talking about foreign policy and the U.S. empire abroad, we're looking at this continue unabated. We're still running on the 2006 National Security Strategy, of course, which was revised under Bush. And when we look at that, actually it was updated in 2008 for Obama. And, let me read you the first two sentences from this document. It says, U.S. interests include protecting the nation and their allies from attack or coercion, promoting international security to reduce conflict and foster economic growth, and securing the global commons with them and in securing the global commons and with them access to world markets and resources, end quote. I mean, there you have it. I mean, that's the national security strategy. That is U.S. foreign policy. Any questions?
No, there's not any questions, but then they cynically lie to the people of the United States. Now, in the time we've got with you, get into what you saw in Iraq on your first visit, what you saw in subsequent visits, what you really have seen in Lebanon when you were there during the bombardment in 2006.
Well, what I saw in Iraq, the first visit and all subsequent visits was, there was, over here it's really easy for people to kind of hear the propaganda. Yes, we're going to liberate the Iraqi people, make everyone safer and happy and bring the McDonald's and all of this stuff. But when you go over there and you see it firsthand, you see the mask ripped off, the propaganda mask ripped off of the U.S. Empire Project. And like all empires through history where we talk about, Russia going into Afghanistan or the British going into Iraq in the early 20th century or the Mongols or Hitler or whatever, you see basically just brutal, savage empire. We're going to come in and rape and pillage and take this country and take their resources and do what we please and leave the civilian population to fend for itself. And that's exactly what I saw, and that's what happened. We see a devastated country. We see over 1 million people dead. We still see today over 4 million people, refugees either within or outside of their own country. And that situation that I saw back in November 2003 is consistently degraded with each subsequent trip that I went into Iraq, including up to the most recent trip I was there, which was just this past February. So that's the situation there. And then we look at what I saw in Lebanon with the Israeli Zionist aggression against the people of Lebanon in 2006. I just actually happened to be flying into Syria the day before that took place and woke up in Syria watching Al Jazeera and seeing the footage of the Israel bombardment of Beirut and specifically the airport. And then things went on horribly for 34 days and killed over 1,000 innocent civilians in Lebanon. And, you know, we look at that situation, and again, it was just, you know, there's all this propaganda, oh, Israel's right to defend itself, et cetera, and it was just total propaganda. This was a situation, I'm sure you talked about it, Alex, where, you know, this was all planned well in advance, totally in cahoots with the Bush administration.
Well, that's now come out that they were planning for years to do this, and some evidence has even shown they had intelligence operatives in southern Lebanon who were firing some of the rockets, and that Israelis were then firing chemical weapon rounds. Did you see any evidence of that?
Well, I absolutely saw evidence of white phosphorus being used, and then, of course, the no-brainer is the fact that Israel dropped over 1 million cluster bombs in just the last 72 hours of that conflict, where literally when the truce was on the table and we knew the deadline was coming, they dropped more cluster bombs in Lebanon than the U.S. did in Iraq in 1991.
And that's blowing little kids' legs off all day. And it's just the way that the Lebanese are then dehumanized.